Excellent. It's so bright I can't see you, which makes this slightly easier. Also, the morning slot. I don't do mornings, so I got up at 5:30 to make it feel like midday, because that's when my brain gets into gear. We're going to talk about redefining test automation, but really I'm going to tell you my journey. So 7 years ago, in this very city, I came to my first ever testing conference, Selenium Conference London, can't count, 2012. And I knew nobody. I'd never been to a conference before. I didn't even know these things existed. Didn't know people spoke about testing, didn't know they blogged, wrote books, not a clue. Went there, stranger, stood on my own, and the first person that spoke to me was Alan Richardson, who was in the room, which is great, because yesterday when I arrived, the first person I bumped into was Alan Richardson. So I immediately felt at home. But I'm going to take you on that journey of those 7 years, because when I was 7 years ago, I had very specific views of automation. I was taking certain jobs, I was doing certain things, and now I disagree with all of them. So I'm going to take you on that journey. So 6 years ago, I took a new job. Very excited. I've become quite known in my town of Nottingham, and there's not too many companies in Nottingham. There's a few more these days. But I took a job amongst many offers that were out there because everyone wanted Selenium. Everyone wanted automation. And I was like, well, I'm Mr. Selenium. Like, I write blogs about this. People are reading this. I know this tool inside and out. I'll take all these jobs. So I took the one that looked the best. I joined, and a similar story that I've seen across our industry. Richard, here's all the test cases. Please automate them. I was like, no worries. Well, easy this. No, give me, 12 months. But this actually became my job. So this isn't even for dramatic effect. I had the darkest corner in this office. It was horrible. It was really dark, surrounded by developers. But I'm friends with them now. But at the time, put me on edge. And I sat there for 6 months writing Selenium scripts. Happy as anything. They would fail, of course. You can go through the cycle. I'd come in the morning, and the build would be red, and I'd be like, oh. And then I'd make it green by lunch, and I'd be like, yes, you still got this. Go and get some lunch, come back, it's red again. I'd cry, and then I'd fix it. But that became my life for 6 months. And I thought this was normal. I was doing well. We had, a number of scripts was going up. But then I went to a product meeting one day. A new feature we were planning on building, and the product owner went, Richard, can you tell me how this is going to impact the system? No. I'm like, what do you mean, no? I was like, I have no idea. I'm like, what do you mean? You're the tester. You've got all this information. I was like, I haven't got a clue how this system works anymore. I can tell you how this script works, and I can tell you what this little script does, and I can tell you this part of the system. But as a whole, I don't know. And the worst thing was, our quality was going like this, because I wasn't testing anymore. I was maintaining scripts. My job had become maintaining Selenium scripts, that I was no longer aware of how this system worked. And I felt pretty depressed. And it kind of kick-started a little journey for me. So why did I fail? First reason, I thought this was right. I was doing everything through the UI, everything, end-to-end for the whole lot, because that's where I was comfortable. That's what I was used to. All my testing in the past had been on the UI. But what I hadn't realized is that I used to read log files. I used to look at some stack traces. I used to have conversations with the team about how the system hung together. But all my scripts were all going top-down. And look at that. This is an example from some training we do. But imagine a big system, the amount of times that you're going up and down, every single line and dot on this model could cause my UI scripts to fail. And it was happening. Every time they failed, I'd dig deeper, I'd read the logs, I'd talk to the developers, and they go, oh, it's got nothing to do with the UI, Richard. It's down here in the API or the unit level. And I was like, it took me 15 minutes to work that out. And it was happening continuously. And another reason I thought I'd failed, I thought, well, it's obviously my fault, right? Because, I'm the one writing this. It's clearly my fault. I'm clearly suck at automation. I'm clearly not Mr. Selenium, got no skills at all. So I started learning how to design checks properly. So I wrote my own model. It's called Sacred. It used to be scared. And then I thought, that's not as appealing to people when you're trying to teach them about automation. So I genuinely went on to a Scrabble thing, and I put the letters in, and Sacred came back, and I was like, ooh. sacred checks, like this amazing thing that we have to keep running and giving us feedback. But I started going through the steps that I did. Obviously, like state at the top, massively important and often overlooked. We don't talk about it, but you need to put your system in a specific state. Create data, turn flags on and off, configure it, deploy it. The amount of scripts that I've ran that immediately just get a white page. It's like, where's the site? Oh, yeah, we're just deploying it, Richard. It's like, what? But I used to run them. They weren't connected. You'd wait for the build to happen. You'd run all your checks. I started thinking about my actions. Perhaps it's my WebDriver skills. My weights aren't good enough. It's always weights, right? My locators aren't good enough. My actual flow through the application isn't right. But it was. And then I thought, oh, well, I'm obviously writing bad assertions. So anyone who's familiar with the exploratory testing world, we talk about oracles as being how we know if there's a problem here. And we're going to have a look about that in a second. But I thought perhaps I'm writing bad assertions. Perhaps these aren't real failures. It's just Richard's written, get text on the screen and check it's correct. That's perfect, right? That's a very good assertion. It's not, no. But I told myself it was. And then a few things I added on afterwards which started to help me was all the build failures were coming to me directly. So I started pushing them into our tool at the time, which was Skype, to give more awareness to the rest of the team that what was going on. Because all that they were seeing was a big red build, and we all know what happens when the build goes red, right? Mass panic, disappointment, everyone looks in the direction of who they think it is. It's just sudden office, just people going, shoot, no, shoot. Or you get one of those guns, you ever seen those nerve guns people coded? So you can see who committed it, and you know where their desk is, so you fire a bullet at them. Didn't have that, but I wish I did. But one thing I massively started screwing up on was execution. I had a really powerful computer, as most of you do these days, and they would work flawlessly on this machine. Like, I would run it 2 or 3 times, and I'd be like, yeah, this is awesome, commit. And then the build would fail, because my company used the cheapest instance of virtual machine that they can buy with like 0 memory, and all the scripts start to fall over, because I didn't think about where I was going to run these scripts. And also deterministic. I didn't really care that they weren't deterministic. I thought that was the point. I thought, well, sure they're going to fail. This system's always moving, always changing. So I thought, actually, no, they shouldn't be. So I started talking to my team about Sacred and discussing more the whole pieces that make up automated scripts. And then I came out with this brilliant thing. So I drew a model at home on my whiteboard, and it was called the flawed approach to regression testing. And then I took a glance away and came back. So, that says fart. That's funny. That's funny. And then once I'd done that, I thought, I've got to share this now because it's funny. But this is what I didn't realize. So every time these checks failed, I would have to investigate. You'd have to find out the cause, which usually took you a bit of time, reading the logs, rerunning it yourself. Everyone does it, right? Selenium scripts failed. Download latest, run. Go on, and you're going to fail in a minute, aren't you? Go on, I know when it's going to fail. Oh, crap, it wasn't that. And then it fails for something else. That's what we do. We download, we watch it. Well, actually, we should just get the computer tell us what's happening. But what was actually happening was I was learning. So as the scripts were failing and I was finding out why, I was learning about the system. And then I would take my learning and fix the automated checks. But actually, we don't tend to fix automated checks. We talk about fixing all the time. But what I was actually doing was creating a brand new one because the system had changed. So I was actually creating a brand new check. But what I tried to dictate with this model is your systems are always changing because you have a job. And there's developers in your team that are changing features, refactoring. And we can only ever have so much knowledge. We can't fully understand our systems. They're too big. They're too complicated. And even more so these days, right? We download a library off NPM or NuGet. Who cares what's in that library? More libraries, the better. But we don't know how those things work. But then we can only automate what we know. So if we can only automate what we know, because we need to actually write assertions to tell us if it ever changes. So I didn't know this. I thought, well, it's just the same as what I do as a human, right? This is just testing. This is what I do. But it turns out it's not. So in my creepiest sore voice, let's play a game. We're going to play a game. It's a really simple game. What I want you to do is find the 5 differences in this picture and then bank them in your head somewhere as if they were regression tests. So I'm going to want you to rerun these tests. So hopefully you can all find, I know it's early, but hopefully you can all find the 5 differences. I'll give you about 15 seconds to find them. I like how there's whispering about this. I found 4. Have you found the other one? I can't find the other one.
I found 6.
Someone did this. I've got to say, don't worry about this whole, there'll be some smart person in the room who's probably got their laptop out, coded a visual test already. It's not about that. Don't worry. There is pixel differences in this image. But what you've all done is just done some testing. You didn't have any information 15, 30 seconds ago. I challenged you. You went and gathered some information. You just used some heuristics. Some of you might be really addicted to spot the differences, and you've got methods for doing this. Or some of you just literally went like that for 15 seconds until you got them all. But that's using your brain, your skills. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is I want you to run the same scripts that you just created in your head against this image. And then put your hand up if you would ship it. No one's shipping it. It's like a trick. Who would ship? Well, Mark, the only one, because he knows how this works. And you're all terrible testers. Actually, no, I take it back. You're all terrible automators, because the same 5 differences are still there. But you're all telling me you won't ship. Why won't you ship? Someone shout out why? There's more. Yeah, there's an extra difference in the ear. So none of you would ship, and it's because you're really bad at following instructions. You're really bad at following the exact things we ask you to do, whereas computers are great at it. So if we ran this through if we look at how the computer sees it like this. It can only look for what you told it to look for. It can't learn. It can't, again, ignore the fact this is an image. It's the easiest way to portray it. But it can only look at what you've told it to look at. So therefore, it doesn't have the ability to learn. Yes, there's lots of interesting tool vendors, I'll use that word, who are promising all this fancy stuff in the future. But at the moment, they do exactly what we tell them to do. So we're the ones who have to detect those changes and re-educate these checks. And it takes a long time. Now, for me, in my space, I call this testing and checking. I'm not going to get into that debate about that. You could call it test and automated test, manual, I put that in quotes for very obvious reasons, manual and automated. Marit recently started talking about attended and unattended, which is an interesting thing. I hope she carries that forward a bit more. Or exploratory and automated. Oh, apples and automated apples. I do not care what you call these things, but as an industry, we need to start appreciating that there's a difference. When you follow, so one of the reasons we're so fixated on UI automation is because that's where manual testing was predominantly done. We were all comfortable with the UI. But what we did, and mentioned Alan before, he's got a fantastic YouTube video on this. What we used to do was we would hand out test cases, and some of you probably still do. Stop doing that if you do. But some people write massive test cases. And then we run them, and the test case says, check the login screen for 2 forms, a button, and a forgot password link. And you all do that. You're all very good. But what you're not so good at is ignoring the fact, oh, that's shiny, what's that? Oh, what's this over there? Oh, that looks interesting. Oh, there's an error in the log file. How did that happen? You all get distracted. You all start to look for other things, but what never happened was we never told anyone we did that. And it's fantastic that you all do it, but we never told management we did that. I used to just tick the box at the bottom of the test case. I ran that test. What did you do? I followed the instructions. I did no more, but I did. I did loads more, and I never told anyone. So when automation came along, and all your managers were walking through vendor expos and stuff, and they were being told that we can automate all your test cases, of course they bought into that, because that's what they thought you were doing. They thought you were just running test cases, and I thought I was doing the same. So I started digging deeper, and I started to appreciate the subtle differences between the computer and what I can do. And both of them are incredibly powerful. We need both, but we have to have both. We can't have one or the other. So now I'm a few years down the line, and I've appreciated that I need testing and I need automation, and they need to work in harmony. I thought, well, how do I do that? So I started learning about testability. And testability is like a topic we don't talk enough about. But in short, Oh, sorry. If you ever see any of these ilities, just put the ability or the ility bit in brackets, and it tells you what it is. So this is our ability to test. This is everything. So testability in our industry is very high level, spoken like, add some IDs to a locator. I've improved the testability. Altering the product to make it easier to test. Very important part of testability, but that isn't testability. Everything is testability. Changing the way we work. Be involved shifting left, shifting right, shifting down, shifting up, shifting sideways really slowly. Don't matter how you shift, but being involved as early as possible is part of testability. So this is really key to everything that you do as in your attempts to test and trying to achieve quality. So as I said, it's a huge topic. There's a fantastic model by Rob Meany called the 10 Ps of testability, and there's lots of other models out there as well. But I'm going to pick up on 5 of the key areas. I'm going to put these all on. So the first one I look at is the team, and I started doing this. It was always me writing the automation. I was employed to do it, and we'll discuss that a bit later. But who else in the team? What skills are in the team? So sure, I've been hired to do Selenium, but perhaps there's someone in the team who has experience. I don't know, because we never discuss it as a team. We never say who's on our team, who's going to contribute. But also, perhaps you have very strict rules in your team that the developers don't write automated tests, and that's not going to change. So that becomes part of your testability. Or perhaps you only have one person in your team, or you have people come in and out, or perhaps they're offshore. All that impacts your ability to test, and therefore your team is really important to understand. Project, how are you working? You all fully agile now, or you capital A agile, or you waterfall, or Wadgile, or whatever the hell the latest thing is? Or perhaps some of you are safe. Dangerous game. But how are you working? How much time do you have massively impacts what you can do. I used to work at a digital agency. Our releases were our projects were like 3 weeks long. I wouldn't write a full-blown framework for that length of time, so I had to think differently. Your product, what domain are you in? So, are you in a domain that has lots of resources, lots of people talking about it? Are you in a domain that's not friendly for automation? Perhaps it's heavily regulated and they don't really understand what testing is, so they tell you to do things in a very specific way, which makes no sense. What technology is it written in? We're all guilty of this. I'm guilty of this. It's a website. Selenium, of course. But actually, what's the underlying technology of this website? Is it written in React, for example? There's loads of tools out there for React these days. Is it written in Angular? Get a new job. But what technology is under the UI? Because it will impact your choice of tooling. So don't just go website Selenium. Pick the right tool for the technology that's in question. And then obviously these days we're all about infrastructure. So do you have environments there? Or do you have the test environment that everyone uses? So that when you run your scripts against it, and then Dave logs on and changes the admin password, and then all your scripts fail because you don't have enough environments. Or perhaps you can't spin them up quick enough, or you work like someone I spoke to last week who said, Richard, I have a problem. This was on Slack. I was like, okay, explain. It takes 6 weeks to get a new environment. And I was like, why? She goes, I have to fill in 4 forms and get it signed by 6 people. And then it goes for approval, and then it has to be provisioned, and then someone builds it really slowly, and then I eventually get it. And then when I get it, it's 6 weeks out of date, so then I have to wait for a week for them to update it. And I was like, wow, that massively impacts their testability. So hopefully you can see everything impacts testability, and I started to take more appreciation of this. So let's go back and look at checks, or automated test, or automated apples. Mark spoke about this yesterday. I started to realize that when I tested, I would look in many places. I would look below the hood, I would look above the hood, I would look at the logs, I'd look at the APIs, I'd try and read the code and look at the unit level. So I started to realize that my checks weren't targeted. So if I'm in the right, my checks weren't targeted. They were always on the UI. But the risks that I was trying to do weren't UI related. They were, can my system take a booking? Okay, I'll do that through the UI because I'm comfortable there. But actually, my concern was literally, can the system just accept a booking? I don't care how it gets there. Is the system designed to go, oh, thank you for the booking? I don't know. I'm going from the UI. So they weren't targeted on a layer or risk, and we'll have a look at that in a second. Started to appreciate the value of reliable scripts. Scripts that ran all the time. Scripts that didn't do this is always what happens. The build goes red, and your scripts just cry. They just sit there crying. I'm red, please fix me. I don't know what to do. And then you look at it and go, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. But it doesn't know what to do. It literally has no idea what to do. So of course it sits there crying. You can, of course, get plugins. The Volkswagen plugin, make everything green. Dead easy, it hides it. Or you can have the CEO plugin. Have you seen that one? You press CEO plugin, all your builds go green just as they're walking past, and then it will go back to the normal state. You can do all that cool stuff, or you can literally fix your checks. I started to realize I needed them to help me more. They weren't very informative. They would fail, and you'd get usual web UI errors. Can't find element, text isn't on the screen, and stuff like that. It wasn't really helping me. So I started to take screenshots and videos and recordings, and now all the tools offer this, which is great. But that information helped me speed up the failure of checks. Mark spoke about this in his talk yesterday, which was great, about we get to the bottom speedy. We want them to be fast, but we forget that it's not just the execution that needs to be fast. The whole process needs to be fast. Your checks will fail all the time. They're designed for that. That's why you built them. You literally want them to fail. So make it easy to fix them make it easy to fix them. And maintainable finally comes into that. So this is trims. This is our model. We strongly encourage to go back and start trimming checks, and that is literally what I did. I went into my code base, and I do something very few people do. I just press delete a lot. Delete, delete. Read the check? Nah, delete. Read another one? Nope, delete. Read another one, went, oh, that could be split into two. I'll split that into two. And I went from about 2,500 checks to about 400 on the UI and about 500 on the API. I started really cutting down what I was doing. So yeah, trims. We did try strims, but again, it's a bit aggressive. I can imagine people just going in and just literally taking an electric strimmer to the checks. But I encourage you to really go and evaluate your checks against this, and it started helping me a lot. So we created something called visual task analysis, which was to help me work out what was going on in our system. So I knew that I shouldn't be doing on the UI, but I didn't know how the system worked. So I started asking questions. That became annoying tester again, as we get called, but it was like, how does this work? Oh, it calls that method, and what does that method do? Oh, it does this. Yeah, but what, does that method call that method? What library does that one use? And I started to learn, and I started to model it. So the important thing about this is I started to appreciate the layers within our application, but really importantly, I started factoring in the protocols or the languages that those layers talk. And if you think about that one from the beginning, every layer talks a different language, so you're converting JavaScript calls into Java code via an API. There's potential for it to go wrong there. You're taking JSON and turning it into Java code. There's more issues that can go wrong there. You're taking Java and converting it into SQL so you can put it in a database. Every time that happens, there's potential risk there. So can we target it? And that's what this is trying to dictate. So if I walk you through this example, so the UI, I'm the star of the show, right? Everyone sees me. So I'm like, oh, you want to log in? No worries. I'm going to talk to JavaScript. And JavaScript's like, I'm the cool kid. Like, you want me to do something for you? I'll do it, but I'm not going to tell you I've done it, because that's how I roll. And I'll just give you the result at some point when I feel like it. But that sends it to the API, and the API is like, oh, you gave me something. You gave me some data. Oh, my God. Oh, I really wanted this. Is it good data? It is. Oh, I'm going to pass this on to the system code, and the system code's like, oh, I know what to do with this. I'm going to give it to my friend, and they're going to create you a token. Oh, I'm going to give the token back to my good pal JavaScript at the top. So they create it, they send it back to the API. The API is all excited again. Oh, fantastic, I know where to post this. I'll send it back up. And eventually we end up at the UI, the JavaScript again. It's like, yeah, I'm still here. I've got something to do. All right, I've done that for you. And then it pushes it back to the UI, and the customer sees what they're interested in. But if you appreciate all that's going on and all those different communications, we can start to target automated checks. So I could automate that the JavaScript calls the right API. I could automate the API, converts the JSON into an object. I can check that the token library we're using actually creates a token down at the unit level. And I could maybe do some sort of visual stuff at the top to check that the form looks correctly. So I can take my end-to-end scenario and turn it into lots of small targeted checks. Which leads me back to this model. So I started applying this to my end-to-end automation, but I didn't appreciate the learning curve of, well, I know Java and how to write Selenium. You want me to learn JavaScript? Okay, I'll try. How do APIs work? I went, well, you just call an API. But then I started learning about HTTP and headers. I didn't know anything about that. I had to go and learn about that. I didn't write the unit test, but I had to appreciate how they worked. But I basically started automating at every layer using this visualization. And the fun thing about this visualization, for people who know me, if you turn it upside down, you get pyramids, right? I hate the pyramid. Pyramid's not a pyramid. The pyramid's a triangle, because it's never been 3D. But the automation pyramid is out there, but this gives you a visual way of looking at it. And I quite like how this one looks like the Shard, seeing as we're in London. That wasn't intentional. But testability started to become my foundation. My first thing I would do when I would join a company was try and measure testability, try and understand it. I didn't rock in saying, give me your test cases, I'm going to go to work. I came in and said, what do you actually need? Like, how is this team structured? What are you looking for? But I also started to appreciate that I might not end up with a pyramid, and that's okay, because I've measured what we can do, and what we can do at the moment with all the effort we've put in is we end up with something that looks like a T, and that's fine. Or I could end up with something that looks like an I. I might have very few API, but less UI and more unit. If that's what my testability dictates, then that's good. I know I'm doing the best I can do. I shouldn't be chasing some model that someone says is what we should be doing, because this might not be possible in my environment. So therefore, I started to measure testability and appreciate that I can't achieve this holy grail of the test automation triangle. But what I'm doing is okay. So if you look at your checks, use the pyramid and use these models as an heuristic. Am I doing well? Is this the best I can do? Can we do better? If we can do better, how do we achieve that? So going beyond checks, I started realizing that checks are good. Automated checks are great. They bring me lots of value. They run quickly. They detect change. They draw my attention. They ask me to explore. And we talk about checks as being invitations to explore when they fail. And that was working well for me. I was dead happy about that. But I started to think slightly differently. So I took a job in London 4 years ago, which is really hard for me. I'm from Manchester. That was a lot of determination there to do that. But I joined a project. And on the first day, I rocked up to the building, and there was a tester already on the team. And I was like, hey. And he was like, right, yeah, welcome, Richard. Welcome to the team. We've just entered regression testing period. And I was like, oh, is this the job for me? And then I went, okay, so tell me what we're doing. He goes, well, it takes 2 weeks. And I'm one step closer to the door. And he goes, we have to run 89 scenarios on 14 devices. So I was like, ooh. And I was like, okay, fine, I'm here to help. But part of this contract was I was also there to consult and improve the way we worked. So I went, I've got an idea. What if I just watch you do it for 2 weeks? And then I'll see why it takes you 2 weeks. And then he genuinely looked at me and went, oh, you're one of those consultants. And I was like, maybe I am. But I asked him, have you tried to automate this? And this was 2014, mid-2014. And he tried to do some stuff with Appium, and he didn't really have any success. And Appium at the time was pretty terrible. Dan won't mind me saying that. But it had issues, like the stable platform, the operating systems weren't stable. It was hard to get really solid automation at that time. And he tried, and he'd failed. And I went, no worries. I'm now Mr. Automation, so I'll be like, I can do this for you. Sat down for 4 hours trying to automate this mobile app. I got absolutely nowhere. I failed miserably, and I came back to him going, yeah, that can't be done yet. We need to work on a few things. So what I did instead was I watched how he worked. And what he did was he spent about 60% of his time creating data. That's what was actually slowing him down. So I observed him for 2 days. I did help him out. I'm not that mean. So I generally did, though, watch him for 2 days. And then after that, I realized what the pattern was. So I thought, well, let's automate the creation of data, right? That's a simple thing. Most of us do that in our frameworks. So this project used MongoDB, the nice, flat, structured databases. Yeah, not here. So I had a clean installation. I created a single entity in our system, and it went into 72 different collections. And I went, no worries, I can script this. I got to line 500 in this JavaScript file for MongoDB and went, no, this can't be done either. So what he was doing was creating data via the admin site. So he was using the real admin site, but on staging. And he was filling it all in, and there was about 6-7 steps to this. And I was just looking at it going, I could just use WebDriver and fill all this in. It sounds like really icky. It sounds like something I shouldn't do. But I did. I did it. I went home, I wrote all the code in like 3 or 4 hours, came back, and I said, run this. And he went, OK. And it created all the data he needed for one instance of the 89 scenarios in about 2.5 minutes. Now, that isn't an automated check, an automated test, or an automated apple. But we did this, and then I improved it and made it better and better. I made it so you could run it once, and it would make 89 instances of the data for all 14 devices with like unique IDs and stuff. And it took about 4 minutes to create all that data. And we saved that project 7 days in a release just by automating the creation of data. So I started to spot opportunities I could use my skills. Now, the best thing about this project was I went to the project manager and said, only takes us 3 days now. And he went, oh, yeah, but you've still got 2 weeks. I was like, I don't need 2 weeks anymore. Let's release early. Oh, can't do that, Richard. Can't do that. Got to go through change management again. It's going to take a while. So I went, well, what am I going to do for 7 days? He went, I don't care. That's OK. But we spent the 7 days exploratory testing. We spent the 7 days trying to improve the testability of the app. We spent the 7 days working with the developers to make the product easier to automate, removed a lot of the animations that weren't necessarily needed. We started fixing the MongoDBs. That's terrible. We started fixing the schemas and the databases. But, excuse me, we basically built a little robot that helped us do our job. It saved us so much time, and then we had more time to do things, and that's what we get sold with automation, right? So I started to think about this more and thought, well, how can I continue to do this? This has proven to be great. This is saving us hours, days. So how else can I do this? So I started having a look. So the first one is repetition. You see what I did there? But repetition is key. If you feel like you've done this before, listen to that trigger. If you feel like, I keep doing this, why do I keep doing this? That is screaming at you to be automated. Might just be a little bash script. I'm really lazy. I wrote bash scripts that started all my systems in the morning on my computer because I couldn't be bothered opening Chrome or Spotify or Slack. So I wrote a script to do it because I'm that lazy. So listen to those triggers. Start shadowing other people. So if you have manual exploratory testers in your team, shadow them. If you're with your automation skills, you will spot little things that they're doing that you go, you know we have a tool that does that. And they'll be like, what? I spent hours doing this. Oh, yeah, we've got a little script. I'll send it you. And they will think it's Christmas. They will be so happy. But also, if you're trying to get into more automation, shadow with other developers or other automation engineers, because they are brilliant. I paired with a developer. I wrote some code, and he literally was laughing at me. He was sat there giggling to himself. I went, what's wrong? And he goes, you just typed all that. I was like, yeah, it's good, right? He goes, oh, yeah, it's right. But did you know that if you press Shift -12 F5 and do a twirl, IntelliJ will create it for you? And I was like, whatever. Oh, my God, it does. They know all these shortcuts, and again, they can save you time. This used to have swearing in it, but basically, oh, geez, is when you get given that test to run or this thing to set up that you're like, oh, my God, not this one again. I had a job once where test cases were piled up on the desk on the way in, my very first testing job. And I don't do mornings, I told you this. So I would rock up at like 9:30, and the tests that were left are the ones that no one wants to run. People used to come in at 8 and take 10 that they liked and then go away for 2 hours and come back again. So I used to get a lot of this stuff, and it made me start to appreciate, can I automate this differently? Time is obviously very important. Anything that takes you a long time, consider automating little bits of it, little bits of the process. If you can't go ahead and do a full automated check, can you do little bits of the job? Steps is a great one. Worked at a mortgage company, and we used to change our rules about who can have a mortgage and who can't. And you used to have to get to step 7 before you were told if you could have a mortgage. But steps 5 to 6 was like, I'm Richard, I live at Test Town in Testville, I earn this much money, this is my job. Really boring. So I took existing WebDriver scripts, wrapped them in a loop of 50, and said, open me 50 instances and stop on step 7. I went to make a cup of tea, came back, and then I had 50 browsers to start my exploratory testing from. Again, saved me huge amounts of time. But finally, boredom. If you ever feel like this in work, you probably might need a new job, but also you might be doing something that should be automated. Testing is meant to be discovery. So if you feel you're not discovering, you're not learning, you're probably doing something that should be automated. All right. But in order to do this, I had to take a step back and appreciate where I'd gone, the journey I'd had. So start of my career, I was C#. I refused to learn anything else. It's like, Richard, you should learn Java. It's all the rage. Hell no, I ain't going near that. Until I needed a job. And then I learned Java. And then half an hour in, I was like, this is the same as C#. But then I started learning other stuff because I realized I had a fundamental knowledge. I understood classes, I understood inheritance, objects, variables. Most of these languages were roughly the same. And I didn't appreciate that. So having that knowledge gave me the ability to Google, and we all know how important Google is. But then JavaScript's on there, JavaScript's red. Me and JavaScript aren't friends. I've tried to use it. I spent a whole weekend trying to understand promises, and I wanted to quit the industry at the end of that weekend. But yeah, me and JavaScript aren't friends, but it is very popular at the moment. But what I'm trying to say is, the more exposure to tools, the more options you've got. And the same, languages, but also the same with tools. There's a billion tools out there now. Give yourself more options. They all work the same way. So try and pick up on different tools, play around with them. Maybe spend, like me and Mark, do like a 15-minute thing. If I can't get the tool to do something in 15 minutes, then it's probably not the tool for me. All right, so I told you I was going to redefine test automation, so let's wrap it up with that and where I'm currently at now. But before we do that, let's look at what these people say. So tool vendors, some of them are great, some of them aren't. But they don't really tend to target you. They try and target your seniors and your managers and the people who have the checkbook. But if you go and read some of the things they promise you, it's all about faster testing, 100% coverage. We can automate your regression. There was a tool vendor that used to have a video of pushing people out of buildings because they weren't needed anymore. We don't want to do that. But basically, go and have a look at what they're saying, because you might have to try and co-argue some of these things. But then also, some of them are saying the right things. They're explaining that this is to help you, this is to support you. Companies, when you see job adverts, right, they never tell you what their problems are. It's, I need someone with 10 years Selenium experience, or I need someone with 20 years in React. You don't get told what they're trying to solve. But we should. They should tell us what they're trying to do. And then I can come along and say, well, maybe I could use tool A, tool B. But you're telling me I have to use a certain tool? That's limiting. So companies should start saying, actually, we don't necessarily want test automation. What we want is someone to come and help us improve our processes, our testing, maybe using automation, maybe not. Certification industry, I have a very dislike for the certification industry. But ISTQB have not just, about 6 months, a year ago, released a certificate in Selenium, which is hilarious because it's got nothing to do with the Selenium project. But they're now telling everyone to get certified in that, yet all the talks you see here are telling you to move on. So basically, don't listen to that industry because they're so far behind that it's not going to help. But to them, test automation is automating scripts, automated checks, and apparently one of them said you could even automate test managers. And I've probably met a few that you could, but not too many. But then we're to blame as well. So we're going around blogging about all the technical solutions that we've covered. I think my most hit blog is telling people how to how to make sure an element isn't on the page. I'm like number 2 in Google for how can I check this element isn't there? Why do you want to do that? But I did, and I wrote the solution, and now I've never gone back and said, please don't do this. Assert on what you should expect to be there. But to us, we're talking a lot about tools and not the problems we're solving. So this is where I'm at these days. So now I talk about automation in testing. I don't talk about test automation anymore. I think it's become tarnished. I think it's become bastardized. And now when I go to visit clients and they say, Richard, we want test automation, and I go, oh, I'm dead excited. Tell me what you want. What's your problems? Oh, yeah, we've got all these test cases and we want to automate them. Yeah, bye. No, I don't. I try and educate them, and then half an hour later, I realized I should have left half an hour earlier and saved myself half an hour. But now I talk about it as, what is your current testing process? How are you working? How can automation facilitate and support that, not pick it up and replace it? So I talk about AIT now because I don't want to be limited to use my skills just for automated checks. I want to build lots of many things. We have a definition because that's what people do, but the key things in there is human-centric. So I don't believe that you can remove the human from the process of automation. We are key center. We create them. We maintain them. We're the ones who look at the green build radiator and decide if that's what we expected or not. But also, don't get biased by green, right? The amount of times I've looked at a green radiator and gone, really? Are you sure? I don't trust them because sometimes there's so much change that you actually get dubious about whether it's correct or not. But we are at the center of all these efforts. We are the ones that turn the information they provide us into context. We can decide if that's something we need or don't need. And we have 4 key areas. We focus on strategy, creation, usage, and education. So strategy, it's so boring, right? Such a dull word. But everyone has one. You all have one. It might be to automate every test case. You might be that, oh, there's a bug, we should automate that to make sure it never happens again. Don't do that either. But you all have strategies. You all have one. We don't talk about the usage too much, but most of us stick them on CI and they give us rapid feedback. But how else are you using automation? We talk a lot about creation, clean code, use the right tools, various things. And then finally, the one that I love the most is education. Telling your peers and your managers what we should and shouldn't be automating, not doing it because they told us to. And the amount of jobs I've had where someone told me, you should automate this. And I'd be like, yeah, sure, no worries. And then I fail, and then I feel bad. But I should never have been given that job. It should have been framed differently for me. They should have been aware of what was possible and what was not. So this is our high-level definition. And then we broke it down into a few principles, which I'm going to fly through. So the first one is observability over understanding. The observability space is growing rapidly. But if you're not aware of it, this is a terrible definition. Don't use this one. Go and listen to someone like Charity Majors. But it's essentially adding instrumentation into our production code to help us know what's going on. Historically, we've spent loads of time trying to test for days, for weeks, to gather all this understanding to make us feel comfortable to ship it. But now the system's out there where we can ship it, and they will tell you the moment it goes wrong, and they will help you find out why. So we should be utilizing these systems and these tools to help us with our testing. We advocate for supporting testing over replicating testing. As I mentioned with the Spot the Difference, I know it was a bit of fun, but I 100% do not believe that you can replicate testing. Fantastic lady, Dorothy Graham, she says you can only do that if your tester is like literally mindless and dumb and has no brain. And she said she'd only met one in her whole career. And she's like 81, I think, now. So there's not many of you out there that don't engage your brain. So the moment you engage your brain when you're following some testing, you are now going beyond that script. So I can't replicate what you do, but I can take some of the important bits and put them into a check so we end up with the best of both worlds. And yes, they do execute quicker and are important, but they can't replace what I do. We advocate for testability over automatability. So yes, I can make the product easier to automate. Of course, I can do all that stuff. I can add IDs into locators. I can add new APIs to create data. I can do lots of fun, wacky stuff. But I would rather fix the whole process. There is no point having fantastic all singing, all dancing automation if the rest of the process is terrible. You would just have a nice shiny thing in the middle of a pile of, I'm not going to swear. So we want to fix the overall process, not just the automation efforts. And you will think about the things that are impacting your ability to automate now, they're probably also impacting your ability to test. Ooh, touchy one. We advocate for testing skills over coding expertise. I've interviewed people in the UK who can write me the shiniest code ever, but when I ask them about testing and I ask them about risk, they glaze over. They can't tell me why. So if I tell them what to automate, they will do a fantastic job, but I don't want people that need to be told. I want people who use their own initiative to go ahead and say, we should automate this. And the reason is because of this risk and that. I want them to do that. So we advocate that people need to understand basic testing knowledge to be very good at automating. But unfortunately, we have a lot of SEDETs out there, or SETIs, or whatever the cool title is that Google are using this month. But whatever their job titles are, they need to have really strong testing expertise. Excuse me. We advocate for risk over coverage. The amount of conversations I've had about coverage. We want 100%. 100% of what? I don't know, but it has to be 100. Why? Because it's the most. You can't get any more. It's like, but what is it? What am I covering? And that's what people talk about, and it's because of the old model. The model they're talking about is all the test cases that are sat in the test management tool. That isn't what we need to do. We need to facilitate automation to help us pinpoint those risks. So this should always be a risk that you're automating. So don't automate things because you all can. You're all awesome. You can all automate lots of things, but pick the right things because they're important. And usually it's targeted on a risk because that's usually what testing is about, trying to mitigate risk, provide information. I love this one. Problems before tools. So as I said at the start, I genuinely was Mr. Selenium in my head. I didn't care what tool you wanted. You were getting Selenium. I didn't care what your problem was. You were getting Selenium. But now I have the skills to fully understand the problem. What are you actually after? Oh, testing needs to be faster, Richard. Okay. But testing is currently working for you. Oh, yeah, we're making billions. Our processes are great, but we need to automate it all. Why? What are you after? Well, I'd like it to be half a day quicker. Oh, great. I can actually work with that. So now let's see how I can get you half a day. But when they just tell me that, when people come in with predefined solutions, and also this is a bit of a problem with some large consultancies. They all have their own internal framework, right? And they take new gigs and they rock up and they say, here's what you need, our pre-built solution that is not contextual to your problem whatsoever. But I'm going to give it to you and I've charged you £1 million for it. We don't need that. We need people who can understand problems. So these are the principles. I use these now to help me look at what I should and shouldn't be automating. Help me to see, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing something that's going to help this project grow? That's going to help this team achieve better quality? If I'm not, then I look at it and I gauge myself against this. I use them as heuristics. But also, we want it to be cool, right? Cool things have principles, so I tried to be cool. So in summary, 4 really important things. Stay on track. And when I mean stay on track, I mean stay focused on that problem. I spent 4.5 hours once trying to get Appium to click a button. Never get that time back. I did get it to click the button, but I had to call Dan and say, Dan, why only click the button? Which not many people have access to Dan to ask him those questions. But what I was trying to automate didn't matter. So I want to stay on track. I want to make sure that if I am getting into a 5-hour battle with some tool, is it actually worthwhile? Should I be doing that? But also make sure your efforts are aligning with your testing. Are they going in the right direction? Continue to learn. There's new tools every week. I think the JavaScript community is still on drinks. I'm not entirely sure, but I imagine we'll move on to fruit or something soon. But there's always new tools out there. There's a lot of new commercial tools as well that the models have started to change. They're more affordable than they used to be. They're more engaged with the community than they used to be. So they're starting to offer some things that we genuinely need. So start checking out what they're up to, but continually learn. Don't just stay, this is fine, I know Selenium or whatever tool now and I'm happy. Keep pushing yourself, keep picking out new tools. Educate the other people around you. So just because things are the way they are, so Jerry Weinberg used to say things are the way they are because they got that way. So change the way they are. Go in and say, we shouldn't be doing this anymore. I advocate that we try this, and this is the reasons why. But if they don't know what should and shouldn't be done, and people upstairs are going to keep pushing down on you, you're going to end up failing or trying automating things that you're not truly comfortable with. So learn ways to educate people. And then finally, make sure that automation is elevating you. It shouldn't be replacing you, it should be making you better. It should be giving you powers that you don't have without it. Ways and time and things to look at the system differently. So make sure you're at the center of it. You can't automate yourself out of a job, because I've seen people do that. Someone has to pick it up when it goes wrong. So make sure it's there to support you. Awesome people who create free images, so thank you to them. And if you want to know more about Ministry of Testing or automation and testing, or even myself, then you can find it on these cool places. But apart from that, I am 25 seconds over, but thank you very much.